So next we have GASPER Kamensek with query folding, what it is and why it matters. Now, a little bit about GASPER. He's an expert in business intelligence, Excel, and Power BI trainer. He's a Microsoft MVP for Excel, and he's at Excel Olympics. He's been an MVP for Excel since 2016. He's a lead author at excelunplug.com, which is one of the top 40 blogs for the Excel worldwide. He's a speaker at more than 50 Slovenian and international conferences. He's a trainer with more than 900 courses and more than 7,000 attendees. He's the leader of the Slovenian Power BI user group. He's the organizer of Excel Olympics conference and masterclasses, and he has a number of certificates. He has exam 778 and 779 in analyzing and visualizing data with Microsoft Power BI and Microsoft Excel, respectively. He is MCSA in BI reporting, that was certified in 2017, and he's a Microsoft Office Master and Microsoft Office Specialist Excel expert in Excel 2010, 2013, and 2016.
Cool, thank you. So that introduction reminded me I need to change a couple of things in the introduction. But anyways, so welcome to this session. This is going to be about query folding. It's something that you need to know if you're using Power Query, particularly if you're using it in Power BI, where the mere fact of using certain sources is more, just happens more than it does in Excel, right? So today we're going to talk about query folding, what it is and why it matters. My name is GASPER Kamensek. As was said, I'm an Excel MVP from Slovenia, and just for Liam's sake, Slovenia is the only country in the world that has the word love in the name. There you go. So we're going to talk about query folding. So before I go to the definition, right, before I do the school thing and just give you the definition, let me actually show you the impact of it, which should, give you a reference of why it really matters. So I'm going to start off with Excel, and let me just give you some reference as to what we're using. So over here in the background, there is a SQL server running on my computer as a VM in Hyper-V, and it has multiple databases, but for our session, only one really matters. And let me show you this right here. So we have a database called Power Query Testing, and it has a single table. It's called dummy data. And if I just run this query, so select everything from this dummy data, it's going to run. Down here on the right, you can see that it's running. And now it's finished in 13 seconds. And what it's saying is this table has 2.5 million rows, right? Now let me do another query where I'll say, now I want you to limit this table to only dates from October 2023. So take the same table, but limit yourself to only October 2023, and I get 19,394 rows. Both of those numbers will matter. That's why I'm showing them to you. And also, in what I said before, right? With Power Query, you can basically connect to anything, and sometimes we connect to databases. And usually in a database, your fact tables will be long, and 2.5 million, that's not really long, but it is in Excel sense, right? If I have Excel, I know that a single sheet is limited to 1,048,000, right? And all that jazz. So with tables like this, I can't just, paste them in. So I need to work with them somehow. And basically, usually for connecting, you will use Power Query, even if you're in Power BI or if you're in Excel or if you're in Fabric and you're using data flows. You're using Power Query, right? And let me just grab, so let me just go here because I already have it in recent sources because I did use it recently. I hope, yes, I did. Okay. So let me connect to this and let me create two queries. They will differ very, very little, and yet you will see that performance-wise, the difference is immense. So I will go to Power Query testing, which again is the database, and the dummy data is a single table, and that's the one with 2.5 million rows, right? And I'm going to say transform. And Power Query Editor shoots up. And I'm going to actually create a duplicate right away. So now I have dummy data and a duplicate of that one, right? In the first one, I'm going to add two steps. The first one will be, I want you to keep bottom rows. So instead of, me saying keep top rows, I'm going to say keep bottom rows, which is something you can do in Power Query, right? And even I'll create a step that does nothing. I'll say, I want you to keep 2.5 million bottom rows, right? Wait, but the table has 2.5 million exactly. So I'm basically saying just keep everything, right? But I did add a step that says keep bottom 2.5 million rows. And now I'll go for the step that I sort of implied with the query that I did before. And that is limiting my date range, right? Because again, this I cannot even load to Excel, but if I just take 1 month of data, I can. So let me do that. Let me grab it. So let me go. I want to limit the dates, right? So I'll limit them with a filter, a simple filter between and between October 1st and October 31st, right? Now that's the way we write dates in Slovenia. It's day, month, year with dots, right? And it's going to spin. And sooner or later, there you go. It created a result. Now in the second one, the second query, which was made on the same data, right? It connects to the same table. I'm only going to add one step. And the one step will be, you know what? Just do the filter on the dates. So I'll do the dates should be between October 1st and October 31st. There you go. Right? Maybe you even saw that it did it like this, which may have surprised you, but let's not get over, let's not get ahead of ourselves. So basically what I want you to kind of get here is that both of these return the same thing, right? Both of these are take the whole table. Now one of them has a step that says, and then take the whole table again in a different way. And then both of them say, and limit yourself to only October 2023, right? And I'm going to do, what we tend to do with these. I'm going to load them. Now, again, I said with 2.5 million, that would be a problem. But over here, I'm not feeling a problem, right? It's just 19,000 rows. So I'm not really concerned about it. And it already did the second one. It's still doing something with the first one, but it will load eventually. So let me wait for that. There you go. It's loading now. And in the end, you should notice they're basically the same, right? So they both loaded 19,394 rows, which remember when I showed you that's the result that you get when you filter the table before when we were in SQL Management Studio. Now, what is the difference, right? They're the same table. They're basically the same query where one has a minute step of, just turn it, or actually just select everything again, but from the bottom up. Now, let me show you a real difference that you're going to notice. I'm going to go to the second one, which is the one that only has the 3 steps, right? And I'm going to say refresh. And I want you to, this time, really pay attention to the numbers here. So if I say refresh on this one, you're going to see it basically says, okay, I'm, doing the communication, and then it says done, right? I did it. Whereas this one, let me show you. I'm going to refresh it. And it says, okay, I'm loading, and then it goes into what, a million? Now I'm actually getting concerned because Excel doesn't have that many rows, right? 1.5 million. What's happening? And if you wait it out, it's going to go all the way up to a number you never would have guessed, but it's going to go up to 2.5 million. And then it seems like it starts loading again, right? And maybe this was too small. Let me show you, because this is key. When you understand this, you understand the symptoms, and then you also realize what is the problem, right? So basically, it seems like this query, when I refresh it, what it does is it goes and it pulls down the entire table, right? So it goes and says, I've loaded all the way up to 2.5 million rows. And then once it does that, it seems like it starts over and says, oh, but I don't really need them, so I'm just going to load, the rows that I need, and that is your 19,000 that we already saw, right? There it goes. Now I did it. What's happening? What's the difference? What just happened, right? And what just happened was query folding, where over here, query folding works perfectly, and over here, we broke the fold, right? Over here, the fold did not go through, and we broke it. And you saw the difference, right? And not just in a sense of the second one spinning all the way up to 2.5 million. It's a time difference. It's a significant time difference, the way this one did it and the way this one did it. So now with this in mind, let's go through two little definitions in our Power Query, right? So what is query folding? Well, query folding in Power Query refers to the process where steps defined in Power Query are translated and pushed back to the data source server, rather than loading it into Power Query and then processing it. Now, it says right off the bat, not all data sources support query folding, and even those that do, not all operations will result in query folding. Extremely important, right? So let me sort of summarize that in a couple of sentences. So what this says is, query folding is a process where Power Query can actually make the data source work, right? Because why are databases all in those servers? Why? Well, because they're specifically designed to handle the data load of working with such a big amount of data. So if you're thinking from a Power Query perspective, is it better for me to go and pull everything, the entire table, right, the fact table from the server, and then running it locally in my RAM, which doesn't really work, right? Or would it be better and more beneficial for me to just sort of create a, let's call it a recipe of what I need, and then push the creation of the result to the server? And that is exactly what query folding does. Query folding, in this case, does this. Let me show you. So I'm going to refer back to the to this one, because this one actually works and it has query folding. And I'm going to show you what is the end result. And I'm going to do that by selecting the last step, doing a right click, and say View Native Query. And what this shows me is the code that is actually being run against the server. So this is what Power Query says to the server that it needs. And the great thing about it is it says, so look, just select the entire table, right? Select the entire table, but then filter it to only these dates, right? So only October of 2023. So before anything gets sent to Power Query, the server does the work of limiting everything to only 19,000 rows. And then only 19,000 rows are sent to Power Query, right? And this is what we call query folding. So query folding is basically Power Query taking its steps and taking its, oh, that shouldn't close. So taking its M code, right, which we know that Power Query is actually producing. So taking the M code and translating it into, in this case, transact SQL. So T-SQL statement that a SQL server understands and can run, but can run way more efficiently than your computer can, right? Because it's built for exactly that purpose. And now let me show you what happened in this one. And first, let me show you this. If I go to the last step and I do the famous right click, oh, there's no native query. What's happening? And if I would go back over here where I had the navigation step, which is basically go to the server, take this table from this database, right? You can see it up here. So just take this table. Now, if I go here, I can see that up to this point, the query folding was still there. So up to this point, it said, look, just run this query. But this query doesn't say anything about October. This just says select everything, right? It might as well say select star from. Might as well say that. And then I do, well, don't know why that is happening. And then I do my step, keep last rows, right? Now, I don't know if you're a SQL person. Doesn't really matter if you are. But the SQL server can handle top N. It has that function. Basically, even if I show you in SQL Server Management Studio, usually, if you want to inspect what is this table, you will usually do that by right-clicking and say, well, there you go, right-clicking. There you go, and saying select top 1,000 rows. And basically what it writes for you, this is very slow, but it says select top, well, there you go, select top 1,000, right? So that is something that SQL Server does well, does extremely well. Well, the problem is SQL Server has nothing that says select bottom. So remember before when we were at the definition? And the last sentence here is very important. So not all data sources support query folding. And even for those that do, not all operations will result in query folding, right? So basically what it's saying here is, if you do this operation, select bottom rows, right? So table less than, there's no way to translate that into transact SQL. But what does that mean? Well, that means that from here on out, what Power Query needs to do is take the entire table from the server and then run the steps from here on out locally. Now again, runs it locally. That is the worst thing that can happen. And you saw it. You basically saw it when we were looking at the refresh, right? This one said, yeah, 19,000, here you go. And this one said 100, 200,000, 300,000, all the way to 2.5 million. And then it said, oh, and now I can run those steps locally. And now here's your 19,000 rows that you need, right? But again, this is a small table. 2.5 million is not that big of a table, right? In real life, when you're working with real data, this is a killer. And it's also a killer if you're creating Power Queries, because basically from this step onwards, and you may have noticed when I was creating, like this one works fast. And then I go to this one, and if I want to really refresh it, I'll be waiting. Why? Because it cannot run it there. It needs to run it locally, and that is a big, big no-no, right? And then from every step from there on out, it will still do that, right? So hopefully with this, we now have this little understanding of what query folding is, right? So the most important sentence here, and I think I even have this slide. Yeah, there you go. So query folding is when you take the steps that Power Query has and you try to translate them into the language that the source speaks, which will usually be SQL, transact SQL, and run it on the source. And then only pick up the result, and that will be, usually a smaller table, a narrower table, or whatever, and only that will get transferred. And what is query breaking the fold? Well, breaking the fold refers to if you have a step in your Power Query steps that doesn't fold or that breaks the fold, right? Because it doesn't translate, it breaks the fold. So let me first show you. I actually showed you, but I didn't highlight it at the time. So let me first show you this. How do I know if my query is folding or not? That is very simple. If you go through your steps and you can right click and it says view native query, sometimes you need to wait for the step to load. So sometimes you'll click on a step and you'll go right click and this one will be grayed out. It doesn't mean it doesn't fold. It just means it's still loading. But if you can do that, if you can right click and see view native query, that means you're in business. That means your Power Query can be very smart and let the source do the work and then just pull the result that it needs, right? But as soon as you go right click and it says, oh, view native query is off, right? Now you're in trouble because that means you broke the fold with this exact step, right? Because the previous one had it. So this exact step broke the fold. And now this is going to be extremely slow because it needs to pull the entire table, or maybe I'm overreacting here. So whatever the previous step was, whatever the result of the previous step was, it needs to pull all that and then run everything from here on out locally, right? And if you ever created queries in Power BI or in Excel, because you can, that connect to a database and pull off, and then you start with a step that is wrong, you realize it as soon as you do, because from there on out, it's just a spinning wheel. Right? And people think that Power Query is bad. Well, no, it's just you built it the wrong way. So how do I know what is the right way, what is the wrong way, right? So obviously keep bottom rows. That's not working. Oh, actually, let me start with something else. Let me start with which data sets actually support this, right? Well, basically, you got all your database things, right? So SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, now OData feeds, everything that, even if you go through ODBC, for drivers, right? But you're connecting to Oracle or whatever it would be, that would still work. So query folding would still work. SharePoint lists. Now here you got SAP, you got a couple more. Now there's a couple missing on this list. Most notably, it would be Active Directory from Azure, or from, depends on which kind of Active Directory you have. Also the Exchange server. So there's a lot of sources that support this, right? In one way, one shape or form. Here's the most important part you need to know. There is no, if you're connecting to whatever, this is what you do and you never break the fold. There is no such golden rule. The problem is each of these has its own set of rules. And I think it even says that over here, right? Not all sources supported. And even for those that do, not all operations will result in folding. Not all operations will behave the same on different sources. So let me show you some that you can sort of count on having issues with. One, funny enough, would be a simple, sometimes you do this, right? Sometimes you go, I'll select all of these and I'll just let you detect the data type, right? And it goes into change type and it does something. Sometimes this one, there you go. It already broke the fold, right? And then it's very, very source dependent, right? But keep in mind, it doesn't mean that every change type step is going to break the fold, right? If I go over here and I say, you know what, this date, that should be text. This one didn't break the fold. This one still works. The fold is still there, right? And I changed date into text, but obviously that can be translated into transact SQL somehow, right? I can even add columns like a custom column, and let me do an ID2 where I'll actually turn the ID around. So I'll go 2.5 million, which would look something like this, and 1 minus take the ID. Right, so I'll add this one, and this one still translates, so works, right? So basically, it's not like every step is going to break the fold. Otherwise, there would be no sense, right? You just need to be careful, because if I would have done this, if I would say, you know what, add column, index column, from 1, doesn't matter. What just happened? Well, I wouldn't need to wait for it, but you can trust me on this one. I broke the fold, right? And there's several others, silly ones like keep bottom rows that just don't translate into SQL or that don't have an alternative. And what's funny is, let me show you one. So let me go like this. Let's create a custom column. Oh, let me just change this back to a date. And now that I changed it twice, yeah, now it doesn't like it. Let me do this. Okay, because it was a date before, so there's no need for that. Let me add a custom column. Or first, let me show you this. If I select this one and say add column, where you take the date and you pull out year, right? So just the year that date happened. Did I break the fold? No, works perfectly. Now I'll sort of do the same thing, but I'll show you that I'm really good at Power Query, because I'll do date dot to text, which is like text function from Excel or format function from oh, I just lost chat. Let me see. Oh, there it is. So like a format function from Power BI, from DAX, right? Date to text, which one? Well, obviously it's the date, and I want you to format it as year, right? Now, as a result, nothing special. It's the same thing. It's just year. What did I do? Well, I just broke the fold, because even though SQL is extremely smart, it has month from date and all those functions, right? So it can figure out the way I wrote it, it doesn't translate into SQL because it's sort of a formatting thing. It's a figure out the number behind which date it is and then grab the year and put it in here. And this just goes to show, right? Because there's always different ways of doing it. One can break the fold. One doesn't mean that you're going to break the fold. And probably the main thing that you should keep in mind here is when you're doing this, right? And you need a step, and you know that it's going to break the fold. Let me give you some examples that are like literally going to break it every time. If you do a merge of 2 queries from different sources, like one would, if you do a merge of 2 queries to the same source, if it's the same database, it can actually translate that and it can still fold. If you do a merge of two queries from different sources, those will never fold, right? And that sometimes you need that. You just need that because you need a certain piece of, data in here. Well, what you do in that case is you go as far as you can before you do that. And in particularly be mindful of, can I make this shorter? Can I make this narrower? Can I just, make it as compact as I can before I break the fold? And from here on out, I'm just going to run it locally anyways, every time. So can I do this step last? That would be my first question. Can I just go like to the end and then just do this step last? Because basically then it's just going to run with whatever it was, and then only that step is going to run a bit longer. But, at that point I'm done. I won't be adding steps and then just be in a cycle. And then one more thing, I don't know if you noticed, but the first one I did was kind of what we all do immediately. We just say, you know what, this detect data type, which basically is change type step. Now, I don't know if you work with Power Query a lot. I'm guessing if you're listening to this, you are. Change type is like the first thing you do. Sometimes it's even enforced by Power Query. If you say use first row as headers, the very next thing it does is it says, oh, and I'm also going to change type, right? Now that we can see that could have broken the fold, right? And if I go from here on out and I now say, oh, and now I'm going to filter, right? And I do the filter that I did before. So I say between and go for this one, go for this one, go okay, right? Over here, I already broke the fold, so this one is only going to happen afterwards. And if I now load this, it's still going to need to grab the entire table, the 2.5 million rows of data, to then run the last one, the filter, which would be a lifesaver, locally, which is the worst thing that can happen. And also keep in mind, if you're thinking in a sense of, this is Power BI, right? This is my Power BI file. I grab the data, bring it in, and then I'm going to publish it at some point. And once I publish it, I will need to, set up a refresh. It doesn't matter if you got a local SQL and you do it with gateways, or you got it, in Fabric or in Azure. Doesn't matter, or anywhere. But basically, you got an issue here, because it's going to need, even Power BI is going to need to grab everything from the server to only then run locally the last few steps and then give you the result. So you've just pushed your refresh time way up, not necessarily per se, right? So this is something that you need to be mindful of. And now that you know how to spot it, now you can actually say, oh my God, I broke the fold. Where did I break it? It doesn't fold here. It doesn't fold here. Okay, so it's this one. What if I did this one last, right? So what if I did refresh, filter row first, and then I'll change the type. Now I know that this one breaks the fold, but this one doesn't, right? So now I just got another step that's going to happen before, and it's a crucial one because that one brings it down. And if I take this, actually, let me do it the other way around first, right? So let me do the change type first and then do this one. I'm gonna close and load. And now it should run this one again, right? And you should see, oh, there it is. Well, it did it so fast that you couldn't really see it, but it did go to 300,000 and then it went up to 2 million, right? But then it started again and says, oh, but I only need to load this. If I now change it, so if I now just say, you know what? Why don't you do this one before, right? And then as the last step, do that one if you need to. If I now refresh it, it's just going to go, yeah, 19,000. There you go, right? So again, query folding it doesn't happen if you're connecting with Power Query to Excel files. It doesn't happen if you're connecting to, you know, CSV files, TXT files, PDFs, or anything like that. But if you're connecting to Access files, or if you're connecting to databases, then this is the most important thing that you should be mindful of in your queries, right? And you should always keep in mind, I should never break the fold, right? Or if I need to, that is the last thing that happens. And basically, let me just tell you the way this should work in real life. You create your query to see the table that you need. If you see that there's no way you can do it without breaking the fold, you basically go back to your DBAs, so database administrators, and you say, this is the table I need. Because the way it's right now, it's just going to break the fold and it's going to refresh forever. This is the view I need. They don't even need to create a table. They can just create the view that you need. And then you go back to Power Query and you just say, now connect to that view. And you got a perfect little query that folds, that works perfectly, and everyone is happy, right? But the worst thing that can happen is what happened here. That you only need like 19,000 rows, but it loads 2 million just so that it can produce the 19,000 locally, right? That's the worst thing that can happen. And let me just show you how Power Query will help you in the future. Because right now, if you think about it, does it tell me anything? Okay, I sort of noticed that it's slow, but did it tell me anything? No, it didn't, right? So if I didn't know that I need to check it like this, I would never have realized that I did something wrong or that something could go wrong. And let me just show you what the future holds, and it would be this little nugget. So this is, well, this is basically my Power BI. This is not the right workspace. This is the right workspace. And one of the things I have in here is, if I can ever find it, is a data flow, right? And data flow is basically Power Query in the cloud. And right now you sort of have Power Query all around. So you have one in Excel, you have one in Power BI, and then you have one in data flows in the cloud. Now, this one is really interesting because right now it is sort of on the forefront. So this is the best Power Query that you can have. And let me just show you why this one actually shows you that. So let me go to edit mode. And basically I have a different table here. Okay. And this is basically just taken from, I think, yeah, it's even, okay. So it's an Azure database, doesn't matter. It just pulls in a table. It's a small table, right? But over here on the right, you can see something that you don't see in Power Query right now, and that is this little icon. And this little icon notifies you that right now, this query is lightning fast. Or in other words, everything you just did, and I can show you, right click, can be translated. Well, maybe not right click. There you go. There you go. Can be translated to SQL. It's a long one. It does all sort of little, joins and whatever. I don't care. As long as it gets translated, I'm okay. Now let me go just here, right, somewhere in the middle, and over here, let me do one of those that you should never do, like keep bottom rows. I'm just going to insert a step right there, and I'm going to keep, what was the number? I think it was like 36 or something rows. It's a small table. And now you can see that I got sort of a visual notification here. Oh, this one, you should never have done that. Because up to here, your query was lightning fast, and now you're going to wait, right? And then I could go, oh, let's move that one way here. And now it says, oh, now it's going to be lightning fast up to here, but there you go again, right? And I can now, I'm way more flexible, and Power Query sort of gives me that pointer. And that, that is how Power Query will look in the future. And it's not even like a very distant future per se. Okay, so let me go back to this guy. Did I just, back. And we're down to Q&A. So hopefully now you know what query folding is, right? And hopefully now you know why it matters, why it really matters. So now questions, where do I go? Do I go to Q&A? There you go.
Hi, Gasper. I published
Hey.
one question that came in, although I'm going to ask some questions because I actually showed the Power Query online as part of my presentation, so it was nice to see it again there.
There you go.
So someone's asking why the term query folding, because they find that confusing. It would be easier to say filter at source or filter before importing into Power Query. Where does the phrase query folding come from? I know that confused a few people.
The idea is sometimes when you're doing Power Query, you're just writing the steps, right? And sometimes you go like you do create a new column, rename, remove column, and then you go again, create a new column, rename, remove column, and you get all those little bumps of steps that can actually be folded, right, into way less. And in the end, they can actually be folded into a simple SQL statement. That's not always the case, but sometimes they can be folded into a way simpler expression. And that's where the term comes from.
All right, so it's folding as in kind of squishing them into that statement.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Making it more efficient if you want.
But that brings me to another question, actually. Is it always more efficient to have query folding? Or are there cases where you want to turn it off?
So I did very recently, I had a case where there was this issue with the views that they created in the data warehouse, where I was referencing different views, but basically the way the views were created by joins, they were both referencing a same column in the same table. And that became an issue because the transact SQL that was created in the end then had duality in it, because it was recalling the same column, and that couldn't be done. So what I needed to do was to break the fold right before that step, and then I could sort of do the join, right? And at that point, even though I was crying, I was literally doing it on purpose. But usually, no, usually you don't want to. And even if you do have to, I would talk to the database people. This, we should probably fix this, because I needed to do some very, very funky things to compensate for this, right?
Yeah. So it's a very rare occasion then. Okay. Well,
yeah, sometimes, I mean, I needed to do it because we needed to finish a project. And there was, once you get into the duality, there's no way around it. It just won't produce a result. So you need to somehow say, okay, from here on out, let's just do it locally where we can actually, do it, and let's break the fold. Yeah.
I mean, it certainly is better if you can have those icons that we've got in Power Query Online, because that just
particularly
makes it so
for
much
noticing.
easier. Yeah.
True,
I mean, for someone trying to get to grips with that, it just makes it a lot easier to be able to see it really easily.
Yeah, I mean, so if you were talking about this, did you show the workflow icons?
I was showing the icons in the steps, and we went to the diagram view, and we were sort of showing that you could do so much you could do in there, which is pretty cool as well.
Great.
Yeah, it's just so much easier to use, isn't it? It's just a lot better.
True. For visualizing, there's nothing like it.
That's cool. Well, thank you very much, Gasper. That was great. We don't have any more questions at the moment, but if anyone does think of any, I'll put the evaluation form. You've got the evaluation form up. There you go. You've done it for me. Yeah, we've got the evaluation form if anyone wants to make any comments. So that'd be great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. And if you have any questions, just find me on LinkedIn or find me anywhere and just ask away.
Okay, thanks a lot. Cheers.
Cool. Yeah, and thank you guys for inviting me, and kudos for doing this. It's a great
hopefully we'll
event
see you again
every year.
next year. Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.
For sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Gasper.
Signing off. Bye.
Okay, bye.